What if the most dangerous weapon in the Middle East isn't flying overhead, but waiting beneath the surface? On August 13th and 14th, U.S. Central Command made an announcement that most media outlets treated as a routine military update. They're calling it Task Force Falcon Strike, the first ever multinational, multi-domain attack drone task force in the region. But here's where the briefing gets interesting. The unit won't just operate one-way attack drones from the air or from the sea surface. They're putting them below the sea, underwater. That word, underwater, is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Because in the history of U.S. drone task forces, that component has never existed before. You've had aerial platforms for decades. You've had naval surface drones in recent years. But submerged attack drones, operating as part of a coordinated multinational unit? That's genuinely new. And the timing raises an eyebrow. This announcement comes just weeks after Iran and Russia signed a comprehensive security agreement. Coincidence? Possibly, but in this part of the world, strategic timing is rarely accidental. Then there's the name itself. Falcon Strike. Not Eagle, not Hawk. Falcon. That's a deliberate choice, because the falcon is a symbol deeply rooted in Gulf Arab culture, not an American emblem. It's a diplomatic signal wrapped inside a military designation, telling regional partners this isn't an American operation with you as spectators. This is built for you. So we're looking at a new force structure, a new underwater capability, and a naming choice that speaks directly to Gulf allies. All in one press release. But to understand why the Pentagon is suddenly putting unmanned systems underwater, we have to look at a number that changes everything about how modern war is fought. That number is 71%. 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, and in the Middle East, that percentage feels even more strategic when you consider where the region's critical infrastructure sits. Desalination plants, underwater fiber optic cables, oil and gas pipelines running along the seabed, gas terminals built on artificial islands. All of it vulnerable, all of it connected by the same body of water that most militaries treat as just a transportation corridor. But here's what's changed. The cost of a one-way attack drone, what the military calls a loitering munition, has dropped to a point where it's now cheaper than the torpedo that would traditionally be used to destroy a target underwater. We're talking about a difference of roughly 50 to 1. A single heavyweight torpedo can cost over $4 million. A submarine-launched drone, built for a single mission, costs a fraction of that. So when CENTCOM says they're putting attack drones below the sea, they're not just adding a new platform, they're rewriting the economics of maritime warfare. And when you rewrite the economics, you change the strategy. Now, here's the part that didn't make the headlines. The unnamed regional partners being invited to this task force. They're not just being asked to contribute aircraft. They're being asked to contribute underwater capabilities. And that means some Gulf navies are about to receive technology that was previously restricted under U.S. export controls. That's not a small shift. That's a signal about who Washington trusts with its most sensitive new systems. And that trust comes with a price tag. Because the real story of Task Force Falcon Strike isn't about drones at all. It's about the economics of war. And how that economics just got flipped on its head. Here's what I mean. For the past 30 years, the American way of war has been built on a simple premise. Precision beats volume. You build one Tomahawk missile that costs around $2 million. You guide it to within a few feet of its target. You destroy exactly what you wanted to destroy, and nothing else. That's the model. That's the doctrine. And it worked. It worked in Desert Storm. It worked in the Balkans. It worked in the early years of the War on Terror. But here's the thing about that model. It's expensive, incredibly expensive, and it assumes you always know exactly where your target is. But what happens when you don't? What happens when the adversary hides, disperses, and forces you to make a choice? Do you fire a $2 million missile at a target you're not sure about? Or do you hold fire and let them move? That's the dilemma the Pentagon has been wrestling with for the last decade, and the answer they've arrived at isn't a better missile. It's a different philosophy entirely. Deterrence by multiplication. That's the term being used in defense circles now, and it's not about having the sharpest arrow. It's about having so many arrows that the target can't block them all. You don't need every single drone to hit its mark. You need enough drones in the air that the adversary's air defense system becomes overwhelmed. That their radar operators have to make split-second decisions about which threats to engage. That their interceptors run out before your drones do. It's not about accuracy anymore, it's about exhaustion. And the numbers behind this are staggering. In the Pacific Theater alone, over the past year and a half, the U.S. military has deployed more than 80,000 one-way attack drones in exercises. 80,000. That's not a typo. And those weren't just practice runs. They were demonstrations. Signals to a certain adversary in the region that the old rules of engagement no longer apply. But those exercises were just that. Exercises. Falcon Strike is different. This is the first time that swarm warfare has been formalized into an actual, standing, multinational task force. Not a drill, not a demonstration, a unit, with a command structure, with rules of engagement, with the authority to actually use these systems. But let's talk about the cost comparison, because this is where the shift becomes really clear. A Tomahawk cruise missile? About $2 million a pop. It's a beautiful piece of engineering. It's also a piece of engineering that takes months to build, requires a dedicated launch platform, and once it's fired, you've committed $2 million to a single target. Now compare that to a one-way attack drone. Depending on the system, you're looking at anywhere from a few $1,000s to maybe $50,000. For the price of a single Tomahawk, you could put 50, maybe 100 drones in the air. And here's the thing, those drones can be launched from anywhere. From a truck, from a ship, from a submarine, from a wooden boat if you really wanted to. They don't need a billion-dollar destroyer to carry them. They don't need a pilot who's trained for a decade. They just need a launch code and a target. And that's the part that should make you stop and think. Because the Pentagon isn't just buying cheaper weapons. They're changing the fundamental math of warfare. And when you change the math, you change the strategy. You change who can project power. You change how deterrence actually works. But here's where it gets even more interesting. And this is the part that's really been underreported. Falcon Strike isn't just about drones in the air. It's about drones on and below the water. And that's a whole different ballgame. Think about it this way. The surface of the ocean is crowded. Satellites see everything. Radar sees everything. If you launch a drone from a ship, the adversary knows about it the moment it takes off. They can track it, they can engage it, they can prepare for it. But underneath the water, that's a different world. Sound propagates differently. Radar doesn't work. You're dealing with sonar, which is slower, less precise, and easier to fool. A one-way attack drone launched from a submarine doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up on a screen until it's already too late. And that's the strategic advantage that Falcon Strike is trying to formalize. This is the first time in military history that underwater attack drones have been integrated into a formal multinational task force structure. And it's not a small capability. We're talking about unmanned underwater vehicles, UUVs, that can be launched from submarines or from surface ships, that can loiter, that can maneuver, that can strike. Some of them are designed to attack enemy vessels directly. Others are designed to clear paths through minefields. Others are designed to do things we don't talk about publicly. But the point is this. The underwater domain has just become a battlefield in a way it never was before. And now, put that in the context of where this task force is operating, the Middle East, specifically the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. Hormuz. If you follow geopolitics at all, you know this name. It's the narrow waterway through which about 20% of the world's oil passes. It's the choke point that Iran has threatened to close a dozen times over the past 30 years. And it's a body of water that's notoriously difficult to defend. It's narrow, it's congested, it's shallow in places. The kind of environment where a small, cheap, expendable underwater drone could cause chaos far out of proportion to its cost. Now, here's what's been happening in the background. For the past several months, there's been a quiet buildup of tension in the strait. Not the kind that makes headlines, No major incidents, no flag burnings, no tanker seizures. But the kind that keeps CENTCOM planners up at night. Iranian naval exercises, new anti-ship missiles being tested, and a steady stream of intelligence suggesting that Tehran is developing its own underwater drone capabilities. So when the Pentagon says it's creating a task force to counter these threats, it's not being hypothetical. It's responding to a real, evolving threat picture. But let's go back to 2019 for a moment, because the contrast is instructive. In 2019, Iran shot down a U.S. drone and then attacked Saudi oil facilities with a combination of drones and cruise missiles. The U.S. response? It was restrained, measured. The Trump administration considered a strike on Iranian targets, then called it off. And then, over the following months, the U.S. actually reduced its footprint in the region, pulling back from bases in Iraq, consolidating forces. It looked, to many observers, like the United States was retrenching, like it was accepting that the Middle East was no longer worth the cost of full-spectrum dominance. But that read the situation wrong. The U.S. wasn't retreating, it was redesigning. And Falcon Strike is the proof. Because look at what this task force represents. Instead of pulling back, the U.S. is building something new. Something cheaper. Something that doesn't require a massive footprint of troops and bases. A distributed network of sensors and shooters spread across the region, operating from the sea, the air, and below the surface. It's a defensive architecture that costs a fraction of what the old one cost. And it's designed to be sustainable over the long term. Not a surge, but a permanent presence. And here's the key insight that most coverage of this story has missed. This isn't just about the Middle East. This is about proving a concept. The Pentagon is using the Gulf as a testing ground for a new way of war. And if it works here, it will be replicated, faster than you think, in a place that's far more consequential. The Pacific, where a much larger adversary is watching every move, every exercise, and every new unit that gets stood up. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not saying that Falcon Strike is a direct prelude to conflict in the Pacific, but I am saying that the strategic logic is transferable. The same economics that make drone swarms attractive in the Gulf apply, with even more force, in the vast expanses of the South China Sea. The same underwater stealth that makes UUVs valuable in Hormuz would be invaluable in the Taiwan Strait. The same philosophy of deterrence by multiplication, of overwhelming an adversary's defenses through sheer numbers, that's being refined in the Middle East, that's a doctrine that could reshape the balance of power in Asia. But here's the question the Pentagon isn't asking out loud. If this model works in the Middle East, what stops it from being replicated somewhere far bigger? Somewhere in the Pacific, where a much larger adversary is watching every move. Watching every move and learning the same lessons. Because here's the thing about a template. Once you prove it works, it gets copied. Not just by the US military, but by everyone watching this unfold. The real strategic weight of Falcon Strike isn't the drones flying over the Gulf today. It's the institutional memory it creates. The tactics, the command structures, the trust built between nations operating side by side in a live environment. That kind of integration can't be bought overnight or surged in a crisis. It's being forged right now, in the most volatile region on Earth. And the silence from the Pentagon about who exactly is in this coalition? That's not an oversight. That's deliberate. It's a psychological operation aimed squarely at Tehran. They don't know if a neighbor is part of the task force. They don't know whose waters might be hosting a launch point for an underwater swarm. That uncertainty, that fear of the unknown, is a deterrent in itself. It spreads the map of potential threats from a single nation's coastline to an entire region's. But look closer, and this isn't just about Iran. The strategic calculation runs much deeper. Beijing is watching these trials with intense interest. They've spent a decade building their own massive arsenal of one-way attack drones, designed to saturate U.S. defenses in the Pacific. They've studied American over-reliance on expensive, exquisite platforms. And for years they assumed that was a weakness they could exploit. Falcon Strike is the quiet, deliberate answer to that assumption. It's the Pentagon saying, "We've seen your numbers, and we're building our own, but with a twist you can't easily counter. Because yours fly, and ours swim. Your swarm is visible on radar. Ours hides in the ocean's background noise, deployed from the depths, launched from the seafloor, appearing where you least expect them." This is the first real test of that concept in a live theater. The Middle East isn't just a problem to be solved anymore. It's become a proving ground, a laboratory for the next era of warfare. And the lessons learned here won't stay in the Gulf. They're going to be packed up, analyzed, and shipped directly to the Pacific Command. The tactics refined over Hormuz will be applied to the Taiwan Strait. The costs validated here will justify the budgets there. So when you strip away the press releases and the official announcements, what you're really witnessing is a shift in the fundamentals of power. For decades, military strength was measured by the size of your carriers, the reach of your missiles, the sophistication of your stealth aircraft. That era isn't over, but it's no longer the whole story. The new measure of power includes your ability to produce and deploy thousands of cheap, intelligent, expendable systems that can overwhelm any defense through sheer persistence and numbers. Falcon Strike isn't just a new task force. It's a declaration that the United States is adapting to that new reality. And the fact that it's being built in the Middle East, with regional partners, in the shadow of an Iranian threat, is the clearest signal yet that the future of conflict is being written right now, in the waters of the Gulf. And this is just the beginning. The first chapter. The template has been drawn, the precedent is set. The question isn't whether this model will be replicated, it's where, and against whom we'll see it next. And that's a thought that should make every military planner in the world, from Tehran to Beijing, a little uneasy. Because the game has just changed, and they're all still catching up.